moving into all the areas of wellness to fill in a lot of the gaps that are there. And really our dream is to have natural medicine fulfill its potential, where it is the dominant source of wellness and you're only turning to mainstream when you really need something acute done.
Well, my business practice for the last 15 years has been documenting what's inside these products, this evolution to substantiated combinations that really can be shown to help your health is a field that is growing by leaps and bounds.
Every ingredient that is used in a product should have a certificate of analysis. But to take that a step further and do a batch test on a finished product, that is very unusual.
Right.
So not every company does that. The better companies do, but all of the small, probably fly-by-nights that you might see on Amazon, the vast majority are not doing that.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Supplements Revealed journey. I'd like to share something with you about my own personal perspective on what it means not only for my own health and well-being when I'm learning things, investing in things, buying supplements, buying products, etc., and how as I'm doing that, I feel good about myself because I'm investing in myself. But there's another facet to this journey that I want to share with you. When I learn things that maybe aren't directly applicable to me, or maybe they even are, but when I can share them with other people who need help, it gives me a fulfillment that's hard to describe. One of the things that we had in mind when we created this entire docuseries, Supplements Revealed, was the idea that this is something that can be shared. This is information that can empower people to become more effective friends, more effective parents, more effective loved ones. They're people that now have new knowledge that can impact other people that they care about. So in owning Supplements Revealed, we want to see that not only are you utilizing this information for your own health and well-being, but that you also are sharing it with other people so that you can help them also. I happen to know that those kinds of exponential effects are what make the world a better place. So I, number one, want to thank you so much for taking this journey. Number two, we are past the halfway point now in our docuseries, and during this free viewing period, you can own Supplements Revealed at a great discount. So I want you to check that out on this page, see what package is right for you, enjoy the discount that we can give you on this, support our vision, and become a person that can not only improve your own health, but the information you share can help others too. Episode 5, phenomenal, powerful episode. Let's jump right into it. A person who constantly stimulates my thinking and understanding is Dr. Chris Schade. Brilliant man who's not afraid to take bold stances and bring things to the marketplace that are of extraordinary quality and have great innovation behind them. We cover a wide range of topics that are hot right now in the world of supplementation. This is a man who's been there, he's seen it all, he's got the academic credentials, and he also provides products to the marketplace. Enjoy this interview with Dr. Chris Schade. Dr. Chris Schade, very much looking forward to this interview and sitting down with you to talk about a subject I know you're passionate about, which is supplements, but also what consumers need to be aware of in supplements and what maybe some of the innovations are. So thanks for taking the time.
Oh, absolutely. I'm always happy to talk with you and always happy to talk on cutting edge subjects where we get to voice things clearly.
So let's start with your background. How did you get into this whole business?
Oh, it's kind of funny. I was, you got to go back a while. I was was a scientist, and I sort of lost my respect for science and its ability to really help people. I was an environmental scientist, and I realized that a lot of environmental science was just pretending to clean up pollution. I did a master's and a PhD, but before that, I had done a bachelor's, and I wanted to do something more impactful, and so I went into organic farming, regenerative farming, and I spent a couple of years there, and one thing led to another, kind of pushed me out. I joke I went out of business the year Whole Foods came, so there was no money when I was there. And then I went back to school, and I did get back into environmental science, and I was looking at environmental metals toxicology and how mercury moves through the environment, where it goes, what it does. And I patented some testing technology there, and I wanted to take that and start a company looking at toxins in people and how to deal with toxins and control potential toxicity.
And then from there, it kind of led you to human applications for this detox?
Yeah, well, originally I was looking at environmental testing, and then I wanted to move into testing people. And initially, I was just looking at mercury levels in pregnant women and risk factors. But once you identify problems, you have to come up with solutions.
Yeah.
And so I quickly shifted into developing supplements for metals detoxification. How do I make things that spin the wheels of the detoxification machinery and get everything to come out of the body without using synthetic chelators?
Now, you yourself had to be, I guess, for lack of a better term, a patient of this because you had mercury poisoning yourself.
Oh, yeah. I had like 17 amalgams in my mouth. And during my grad school days, I was in a building that had massive amounts of liquid mercury spills in it that they didn't really know about or weren't really tracking. But when we went in measuring vapor levels in the ambient air, they were right on the edge of OSHA standards for chlor-alkali factories, which are factories that use pools of liquid mercury to separate salt into sodium and chlorine gas. And so it was super high levels in there. And then I have all these amalgams, and I decided to get all my amalgams out in one day and start using chelators to clean myself up. This is really where I figured out that I had to develop a naturopathic technique for detoxification, because the chelators are really wasting me out. And that was what led me into developing things for the glutathione system. And what really led me to where I am now as a bioavailability and absorption company, as well as a basis of detox, is that I needed to get glutathione into the body so that I could mop up all this mercury with glutathione.
What does glutathione do?
Well, glutathione is a tripeptide. It's 3 amino acids that you make in your body and link them together. It's your primary antioxidant in your body, but it's also one of the biggest detoxification elements. And in the context of mercury, you link glutathione onto the mercury to make a conjugate that's then recognizable by transporters that move it out of the cell to the blood, from the blood to the liver into the bile, and out to excretion, or through the kidneys. So the first part of getting rid of stuff is having enough glutathione to link it onto these metals.
So it's interesting because, as a consumer might look at nutrition, very often what's marketed to them and what they see everywhere is based on deficiency, saying, you're lacking in this, and this, but there's a second side called toxicity.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where you started in the toxicity side.
Yeah, I started more on the excess side, not your low in B vitamins or something. Your excess in these things that are distorting your natural vitality. They're holding down energy generation in the thyroid and the adrenals and the mitochondria, or they're distorting your neurotransmitters, distorting your hormones. They're keeping you away from your optimal.
Right.
And so my job is to get that stuff out. But in the case of mercury, where I need glutathione, you can't take a pill of glutathione. You have to, if you take a pill of glutathione, transpeptidases, enzymes in your GI tract, break it down into its constituent amino acids. So we needed a bioavailability cheat, some way to get in past the blockages to absorption. And so that led us to the use of liposomes and lipid nanoparticles.
So you talk about liposomes and nanoparticles. Can you interpret what that means?
So we have a molecule we want to absorb that doesn't absorb normally through the GI tract. And so what we end up doing is making something from a class called lipid nanoparticles. And the most common of these that we use is called a liposome or liposome. And it looks like a little cell. You use the same thing that your cell membranes are made out of, called phospholipids. And you make a little spherical vessel that's got a little water core in the middle, and your glutathione or vitamin C or lipoic acid is dissolved in there. And if you make these small enough, when you take them in the oral cavity, they start absorbing right through the oral mucosa into circulation. And when you swallow, they also passively absorb through your mucosa in your stomach and in your upper GI. And so you're able to cheat the absorption mechanisms that might need a transporter, and you're able to go in just spontaneously right through the mucosa.
So it's sort of like these Trojan horses that you just put in there and they kind of find their way home without being recognized.
Yeah. You know, I don't want to cast them in a negative light. Yeah. They've got nice players inside, not soldiers, and they make it into blood and they make it into circulation, and then they slowly leak out their contents. But one of the interesting things is even then, so part of that is to get into the blood, but these also help get into the cell. There's something called a fusion where the phospholipids of the liposome mix with the cell membrane and bring those active components very close into the cell, and you can get a much higher absorption into the cell. So one part is the absorption into the blood, and the other one is into the cell.
And in the end, that's what matters, right? It doesn't matter what you put in your mouth. It's a matter of what gets into the cell, right?
Yeah, no, it really is.
That's really the whole deal. So was it difficult to figure out how to have a liposome work with glutathione? I mean, how did that come together?
That's a really tricky one. I mean, first there's just making liposomes work, and to make them work, they have to be in the right size range. They have to be very small, what we call nanoliposomes, where they're less than 100 nanometers, and they're a transparent emulsion. And so that's one part, but then you have to get the cell membrane chemistry right, and there'll be blends of phospholipids with other co-surfactants that enhance this absorption. But then for glutathione, you have to nail the chemistry of the aqueous solution there, and that's the ratios of water, ethanol, and glycerin to minimize the breakdown of the glutathione. I mean, this is a really big problem. And people will say, people make liposomal glutathione on the back. Oh, yeah, it's shelf stable. And you get a product and you go analyze it for glutathione levels, and you'll find, there's 50% of the glutathione, or 30, or 10. I even found one bottle with 2% of the label claim of glutathione left. Everything else was already broken down into other forms because it's a very labile, non-stable molecule.
Now, I've visited your lab and I've seen kind of the testing equipment you have. So as you're creating these formulations, there's ways for you to literally to test and see, okay, how stable is it? Is it holding up? Is what's going to be on the label what's inside? Is that one of the main things a consumer should be concerned with when doing their research to determine what product to buy?
Yeah, they should be concerned with labs that take a lot of time to do this. And so there's stability of the liposome particle, stability of the whole solution where it's not separating and the lipids are going to the top or something's falling down to the bottom. The same concentration all the way through, that they've taken pains to look at the stability of the product over time, and they have that stability data to back up the shelf life of the product. And ideally, they've looked at uptake of the particles too, because just because you make a liposomal particle, everybody thinks, oh yeah, well then you have 100% uptake. And that's not true. They really have to be made right, the size, the membrane chemistry, and then you can demonstrate that efficacy with human studies of uptake in blood or CACO2, which are intestinal model studies, but some work has to be done to validate your particle system.
So now, if I'm a consumer interested in buying a quality product that's going to get into my cells and I'm watching this, I'd say, well, how do I figure that out? I mean, what kind of research can I do online when considering a product that would, or maybe even reading a label? Is there any type of third-party validation that I could look for, or what should I do?
Yeah, it's not often on the label. I mean, some of the labels will bring up a third-party GMP certification, but it's usually on the website where they have some of their bioavailability data to demonstrate that. Or if you call up the company, they say, "Oh yeah, it's over here in this section of the website," or "Oh, we can send it to you." Or if you're at conferences and you're going to meet these different vendors, like if you're at Bulletproof or PaleoFX, you can go up to these booths and ask them for this kind of data. And a good group is going to be able to show you the uptake data that validates that it's better than a regular capsule type delivery.
So with Quicksilver Scientific, your company, what kind of products do you develop? Like, what would you say the purpose of the company is?
The purpose of the company is to constantly raise levels of health and vitality. We have an underpinning, a core competency around detoxification, and I consider that one of the pillars of a good health program, and knowing how the body is able to get rid of things. And so we have a great setup around that, but then because we got so good at the deliveries, we're expanding into all these areas of wellness where the delivery is a really crucial part of really getting the dream out of the supplement. I mean, we all remember when resveratrol came on the market, and it was like, oh, it's going to make us live longer. It's going to be like fasting mimicking. And it really just isn't, because it doesn't absorb that much. And so there's a lot of compounds that are looking for this absorption edge. And when you get that right, the product really sings and it starts to do something that it wasn't doing in a capsular form. One of the interesting things we're working on now is a aromatase inhibitor. Right now, there's a plague of men converting their testosterone into estrogen because of all the plastics and different toxins that we're exposed to that stimulate that process. And there's a compound called chrysin that in cell cultures was shown to inhibit this. And so all the bodybuilders would take it, but it never did anything. Because as part of its absorption, it's actually metabolized. So it's changed. And it's no longer even chrysin when it's absorbed. But in these nanoparticle deliveries, it gets absorbed as chrysin without being modified, and now it can do something that a capsule couldn't even do.
So you had this fundamental competency in delivery in the detox arena, which is still critically important, that people, they need to focus on getting bad stuff out, not just getting good stuff in, right? I mean, it's really a big piece of the puzzle. And I know that you've created, basically kits even for liver detox and other such things, that are very popular. But now it's interesting that you're saying, hey, now that we developed this core competency here, we can apply it on the other side of the equation.
Yeah, and so we have immune protocols coming out the next year where we're going to have a lot of antimicrobials in these formats. We have a big hormone platform coming out. The chrysin will be part of that. Some hormones that we deliver this way. In fact, we have a whole testosterone delivery that will be licensed out to compounding pharmacies. And that'll be a real game changer where you don't have to do these injections anymore. You're not rubbing cream on that's going on to your kids and dogs. You do this once a day, pump, and whoosh. Just moves on in. And so we're moving into all the areas of wellness and to fill in a lot of the gaps that are there. And really our dream is to have natural medicine fulfill its potential, where it is not just an alternative to mainstream, but it is the dominant source of wellness, and you're only turning to mainstream when you need a hardcore antibiotic, when you really got to shift the needle, when you really need something acute done.
Yeah, something more radical as an intervention, but otherwise shouldn't be necessary.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of, lack of a better term, scamminess in the nutrition world. I mean, you see infomercials, and again, I'm not sure, maybe some of them are valid products, some aren't. But so often you see, especially people who are critics of the industry, we'll talk about, you're wasting your money. You're literally peeing it down the toilet.
Oh, yeah.
And none of that stuff is really supporting you. So how do you try to separate, the valid manufacturers and brands out there versus these more scammy types? Like, is there anything people can look for?
Oh, well.
We don't have to name names, but yeah.
Well, one area where you see a lot of this because there's so much money in it and it has low bioavailability is in the CBD market. Mm-hmm. And so we were the first in there with a nanoemulsion delivery with a high and rapid bioavailability. Mm-hmm. And then I started seeing these other products come out claiming massive bioavailability, showing graphs that don't make sense from any toxicokinetic sensibility, talking about their quantum enhanced technology and really, big highfalutin terms that really had nothing to do with real bioavailability. And so if the claims seem really big, but there's no science pages in there, that's an evidence that you're probably onto a scammy product. If they have a lot of testimonials on the pages talking about these radical things that this product did from them overnight, that's more of a scamminess thing. And it's unfortunate because that stuff does give a bad name to the whole industry, and it does fuel these people from mainstream medicine that say, oh, supplements don't do anything, all this stuff doesn't do anything. But one of the beauties now is that PubMed, well, it's not PubMed. PubMed is just a place where you can go and you can look at all this stuff. But globally, there is so much research being done on natural compounds and their ability to change your biochemistry that anybody says that R-lipoic acid doesn't do anything, there's a stack of papers this high showing it does. And even though I think resveratrol can do more for you in a better delivery, there's a stack of papers this big showing that it does things. And so there are real therapeutic compounds out there, and there are professional companies that do a very good job of getting the right product to you. And then there are scammy companies, and there is a lot of junk out there. And so it's about discrimination and reading what they have for you online, reading what printed material you have, and are they speaking from a valid scientific perspective, or is it all markety, glitzy stuff?
Is one of the telltale signs whether the company that's manufacturing has a full product line versus, we got this one product that we make, or is that not necessarily a way to kind of try to separate ththings? Or
it's not 100%, but it is a good... What it tells you is that it's a marketing company. It's not a product company.
Right.
Because product companies don't make one product.
Right.
Occasionally there'll be a big patent around something and it'll be huge, like TA65, where it's like they're doing one product because it's really expensive and it took a lot of energy to make, and it's more like a drug and they're selling a drug. Right. They're selling this really high-end product. Right. But that is one of the ways to see, and you'll run down through the websites and all it is these, glamorous claims, and in the About Us, there's no people. Yeah. There's no, and here's the CEO, and he was a PhD out of pharma, and then this guy is a clinical nutritionist, and this guy is that. And you don't have the ranks of the executive force that are qualified professionals. It's just a P.O. box, in Utah somewhere.
So you mentioned CBD. You've got a great interest in that, and see, I think, a lot of promise in it. So what is it about CBD that is like so compelling right now, and why is that emerging as a very popularized supplement?
CBD, I'll often say, is the most important supplement in the last 30 years because, now overall, it's this thing that creates balance. I call it neuroendoimmune poise or balance because it balances neurotransmitters, it balances hormones, and it balances the immune system's response to inflammation. But the most important aspect of that is the way that it deals with neuroinflammation. Neuroinflammation is an inflammatory process extended into your brain, and it shifts your body over into fight or flight very quick. The autonomics get locked up. The autonomic nervous system is the behind-the-scenes nervous system, and they get locked into this fight or flight mode, and it distorts the neurotransmitter situation in the brain. It creates a lot of anxiety and brain fog. It may even move into psychosis, and it keeps the body from repairing itself and detoxifying itself. And CBD very, very quickly brings that into balance, turns down the glutamate excess that's part of this, and protects you against any inflammatory processes that are happening. So in the end member of the autism world, you'll see neuroinflammation as a characteristic there. And as long as they're neuroinflamed, you try to detoxify them and all hell breaks loose. And when you conquer the neuroinflammation and then go in and skillfully work on the liver, you're able to achieve real results in short amounts of time. And that's not just autism, but people with mold toxicity, any neurodegenerative problems, Lyme disease, any of the metals toxicities. It very quickly brings you back into a stable place.
So what forms of CBD, should a consumer consider? What are they looking for when they're looking for a CBD product?
Yeah, so CBD is one of the things that's great for a high bioavailability delivery because it's very expensive and it's got a poor bioavailability of 6 to 10%. So it's usually sold as oily extracts that are then dispersed or dissolved into an oil carrier. So that would be a hemp extract in an MCT or olive oil or sunflower oil, either in a dropper bottle or in capsules. That's the most common one. And then there's some isolates of pure CBD, and then there's a couple of products that are working in this high bioavailability, some sort of nanoemulsion or liposomal technology. And really, a liposome can't do CBD. It needs to be a nanoemulsion. But then, what do we look for in CBD? Now, fortunately, in the beginning, people had all this contaminated CBD from China, and they were way under potent. If they said there was 25 milligrams, there might be 5 milligrams. That was all a mess. But now it's kind of industry standard to have every batch tested, either in-house or third-party, and some amount of third-party validation. So most CBD companies will have some sort of validation to give you. And then your choice is, do I want full spectrum, broad spectrum, or isolate? Full spectrum has all the cannabinoids in it that were present in the plant, including some amount of THC. It's usually about 20 parts CBD to 1 part THC. There will be other things like CBG and CBC and CBN, CBDV, THCV. These all round out what they call an entourage effect. But that THC in there, even if people say, well, it's not all that much, you will test positive on a drug test. Wow. And we've done a lot of research around this. And if you're worried about that, then you want to go to a broad spectrum. In a broad spectrum, they're using some advanced chromatographic techniques or distillation techniques to remove the THC, but retain these other elements. And then there's an isolate where they've purified out crystals of CBD. And so the broadest effect is generally from the full spectrum, secondarily the broad spectrum, and there are things that you can do to make that more like a full spectrum. There's companies that use a lot of beta-caryophyllene, which is a natural agonist for the CB receptors and acts the way THC does for you in the full spectrum. We use a lot of that, and that helps round that out. And the most minimalist is the isolate in terms of how many different things that it affects in the body.
Now, sometimes I see marketed hemp oil, full spectrum, and then CBD, full spectrum. Are they different things? Are they the same thing?
All of this is the industry's attempt to stay on the right side of the regulatory bars.
Okay.
And when GW Pharma put in their investigational new drug application, some interpretations of that were that CBD, cannabidiol, cannot be sold as a dietary supplement. But hemp extract containing high amounts of CBD is still okay. And so by that interpretation, the isolate would be no good, and these broad and full spectrums would be better. And so they called those hemp oils. And other people said, nope, I'm selling CBD. I'm going to call it CBD. And so Canavest took that approach and just called it CBD. We called it Colorado hemp oil. And on the back, when you go to see how many milligrams of CBD they're in there, it says phytocannabinoid diols, which is a technical term for CBD and CBG together. And we went that route. So the confusion there is not because the companies are trying to defraud you, although that does exist.
Yes.
Because when you go to get hemp oil at Whole Foods, and you say, I want hemp oil. They lead you over to the fridge, and next to the flaxseed oil is the hemp seed oil. And then you buy that, and you're like, wow, it's only $10. That stuff Chris Shade sells is $100. And boy, he must be defrauding us. But there's no CBD in that. That's a nutritional, it's a food oil, and there's no CBD. And so unfortunately, because we didn't know where regulations were going to go, different people adopted different ways to talk about that. So just make sure it's not a food oil. Look through the websites. You'll be able to figure out that this is a CBD product, whether they call it hemp oil or CBD.
Yeah, and this is like the wild, wild west, right? I mean, because in some states maybe having THC in it is okay. Other states maybe they say you can't have a product in a state with THC in it.
Well, one of my clients, the DEA, went in and grabbed a bottle and they said, "Is this THC?" And they said, "No, sir, this is not THC. This is CBD." And they said, "Is there any THC in there?" And they said, "Well, it's Farm Bill compliant. There is some residual THC, but it's in the plant below this 0.3%. And we'll talk about that in a second because people have to get clear on hemp versus marijuana-based CBD, which is all kinds of BS around that. Right?
Okay.
So, no, sir, it's Hemp Bill compliant. And the DEA guy goes, "If I drank this whole bottle, would I get high?" Now, a couple of years ago, with these 10-to-1, 20-to-1 products that were out there, the answer is unequivocally yes. You're going to get really high.
Right.
And so there was a move from a lot of people to do these THC removed ones so that the DEA didn't have anything on you.
So that's what kind of spawned that.
Yeah, the THC removed. Now, a little bit of THC in there is quite good, but if you're at high doses of CBD, it might become intoxicating. So there's sort of a Goldilocks, a best level there. And as we look forward in the crystal ball of what medical marijuana is going to be, it's going to be specified THC CBD ratios for different issues, like cancer likes high THC and a moderate CBD. Neuroinflammation likes high CBD with a little bit of THC. And we'll find the right ratios, we'll mix in the right terpenes or essential oils, and we'll mix in the right nutraceuticals to round the whole thing out. So that's what we're moving to as we just sort of settle all these things out and the Farm Bill comes out. And so for protection, I did a THC-free one, but now moving forward, I'll have one that's full spectrum that has a legal amount of that in, and I'll have the tests clean, THC removed one.
Is this, you said maybe in the last 30 years, one of the most important new supplements to come to the market. And we've really seen there's this dogmatic attachment to, this criminal thought about marijuana or hemp-related things. And now, everything seems to be shifting at a radically fast speed where people are letting go of that and seeing the virtues.
It just flipped around like this. Yeah. And I remember there was this point in time I'll never forget, and where I traveled. I did 3 trips in a row in like a week and a half. And on each one of those trips was a woman next to me, generally elderly, 60s, 70s, that heard me on the phone getting onto the plane or saw something I had, figured out what I was doing and what I had, and put their hand out and was like, I want that. And this one time I'm on the phone joking with my friend about cannabinoids, and I turn to my left and there's 2 ladies staring me down, both in like 60s. And I'm like, This is Colorado, man. And the one lady says, what were you just talking about in milligram dosages? And I'm like, cannabinoids? And put her hand down. And the other woman did too. One had cancer, the other one had chronic pain, and they had heard that this could be the answer.
Wow.
And I'm like, it all just changed. Wow. It all just changed. And then I find my aunt has her own bottle, and like, you know, all my relatives are like calling me for it and stuff. I'm like, yeah, we're there now.
I love it. I love it. So obviously, then this is a part of your future as far as where your company's going to go and what it's going to be working on.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, people talk about the entourage effect, you know, oh, you have to have all the aspects of the plant. Dude, the entourage is way bigger than one plant. Mm-hmm. You know, you've had it when there's curcuminoids and boswellia and CBD together in there. It's a beautiful, big effect, and we're hitting gene targets at so many different levels. And that's the future of these cannabinoid-based medicines. It's going to be a beautiful blending of the bounty of the natural pharmacopoeia with that awesome plant, cannabis.
Earlier, you mentioned a difference between hemp and marijuana. So what is the difference?
Yeah, and the thing is, the difference is there is no difference. And it's kind of like cultivars of tomatoes, you know, that there's yellow ones and red ones and big ones and small ones. The scientific world has finally come to terms with the fact that there are not different varieties. There's not cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, cannabis ruderalis. There is only cannabis sativa, grown in different areas, bred by different people, for different effects, and adapting to different climates. Mm-hmm. All of these have a resin that grows on them, these resin glands. Mm-hmm. And ones that were bred to get you high have high THC, and ones that weren't end up with high CBD. Mm-hmm. And especially if they are bred to be legal to keep the THC down, they'll have high CBD levels in the oils. Now, what's marijuana and what's hemp? This is an arbitrary line in the sand. You take the whole plant and measure the THC weight percent. Mm-hmm. What percent of the total weight of the plant is THC? If it is below 0.3, it is hemp. Mm-hmm. If it is above 0.3, it is marijuana. 0.31, your marijuana. 0.29, your hemp. That's the only difference. This is a breeding thing.
They're variations of the same plant, basically.
They're variations of the same plant.
Right.
And so the Californians, which grow the marijuana and, you know, aren't quite as law-abiding, and they'll use the marijuana stuff to make CBD and then sell it, they claim that their product is so much better. Now, one of the things they'll have in those products is more THC. And for some things, that works well. Mm-hmm. But it is not like the CBD is any different from one to the other. They are just ratios of CBD to THC in these different evolutionary varieties of the same plant. So don't buy into that game.
Interesting. Yeah, because I've heard the controversy, but nobody's ever really kind of laid it out like that to say, you know, it's just variations of a common thing as compared to saying they're different things.
Yeah, they're not different at all.
So what's getting you up in the morning right now? Like, what are you most excited about?
Oh, we have a bunch of new capsule-based delivery systems for doing a lot of the antimicrobials. I'm very focused on the Lyme community now, and some of these things are ultra bitter, and so it was certain things are a challenge to do in these sublinguals. And we found this beautiful capsule-based nanotechnology where you take a capsule, it goes into the stomach, it mixes with water, and it turns into these lipid nanoparticles in the stomach. And so we've opened up this whole world to the antimicrobials. We have a whole bunch of metabolic modifiers. So people are into ketogenics now. We've developed this system for turning you into ketosis in a single day, blocking this path called mTOR, increasing autophagy and mitophagy. And that I mean, detoxifying, taking a toxin out is one thing, but taking all the damaged cells and damaged mitochondria and taking them out and replacing with new ones, that's a whole new level of detoxification. So we've got a series of products around that, and we've got these blends of cannabinoids with all of these other natural entourages. And so that's been a really exciting phase, and I've got a killer research team, and we're buying a whole bunch of new equipment so we can measure all over at where all this stuff goes in the body and really have the kind of data sets that the pharmaceutical companies have. So we really know what we're doing, and we can really, again, get to that goal of replacing that allopathic conventional model with this really high-end, very sophisticated model of how to use the natural pharmacopoeia.
And that really kind of, in my mind, is an aspect of your purpose that's clear. Like that's something you want to affect in the world, is to see that, we're overprescribed, and these pharmaceutical companies, I think it's no secret that there's a malevolent aspect to them. And the idea of saying there's the old "let food be thy medicine" concept, right, is saying that we get ourselves to health when we have challenges without these toxic substances.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's really all about.
Oh, number one is food. Number two are these medicines made from food. Mm-hmm. And then number three, when you're really under the gun, is you get one of those pharma things to, flip a switch quick.
Yeah. Sounds like a good protocol to me.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, as always, really enlightening to sit and talk with you, and thanks for sharing so much here with our audience.
Absolutely. I always love doing it, and I look forward to doing it again.
How do you like the intensity of Dr. Shade? When he says something, he means it. Phenomenal context and information. Thanks for being here to enjoy this interview with Dr. Chris Shade. In this entire world of supplementation, one of the people I respect most is Greg Horn. I've known Greg for a lot of years. He's played many big roles in the supplement industry, and he minces no words about what's right and what's wrong. When I have questions about supplements and I have questions about the quality of supplements, he's one of the first phone calls I make. Greg is a wealth of information. Enjoy this interview. Greg Horn, out of all these interviews we're doing for this series, I was really looking forward to this particular one, so thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Pat.
And it's like hitting a moving target. It's like, okay, you're between here and there, gotta get to the airport, but here we are, so I'm really glad to get it in. I know a lot of people in this industry, and out of all the people I know, I respect your opinions because of the perch that you sit in, the experience you've had. It's like the best opinion and advice I can get is from you. You know the manufacturing side, you know the source material side, you know the economics, financial side. You have like a 360-degree view like no one else, I believe, in the world. You could be like the top guy, if not one of the top guys. I also know that you've been, I think as you put it, in the room when it happens. I mean, you were with Atkins when Atkins was emerging. I think supplements that you designed and developed last year in the marketplace was over $1.2 billion that it's sold out there. So the scale of what you're doing is pretty significant, yet you're still like looking for the new things that are emerging in research and getting them into the marketplace. So I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Well, thank you, Pat. We've had a lot of commercial success, but more importantly, we've actually helped a lot of people in natural and organic and in therapeutic nutrition really improve their health, and the proactive people you're talking about actually act on their good intentions and get something that gave them a good value and a good outcome.
So let's talk about, a thumbnail of your bio, getting into this industry and the things that you've done.
So I decided I wanted to go into this industry, the nutrition industry, when I was about 15 and a half years old, and I read a book called Sugar Blues, cut sugar way out of my diet, and felt so much better. And with that visceral confidence that you can only have when you're about 15 and a half years old, I decided I wanted to really learn everything I could about what you put in your body and how that's connected to how you feel and how you perform and how healthy you are. So that led me to a fantastic career in the nutrition industry, starting with a little company called General Nutrition Centers. Back when it
GNC
had,
for sure.
GNC, when it had under 1,000 stores. And I was there for 11 years. originally in charge of research and product development and marketing. Eventually left as a CEO, and we created there the first glimmerings of effective nutrition. And effective nutrition is my term for when you take something that you put in your body and you can connect it through clinical research or actual measures that are impacting your health, and you can prove that it works. When I left GNC, I went to a company called Garden of Life, which is a fantastic natural and organic supplement company and food nutrition company.
You were the CEO there also?
I was the CEO there also, and during a turnaround time in that business, and learned a lot about natural and organic living. Along the way, I actually got a health condition called chemical sensitivity, which completely transformed my view of the natural part. I was always a scientist aficionado on the link between science and nutrition that's provable. But when I had to adopt this more natural, healthy lifestyle to help my own illness, it really made a big impact on my perspective on the effectiveness of organic, natural, cleaner foods as well.
So it's interesting, and I know, having just worked with you in the past, that when you're working on a product that you develop, you put together like a binder of like research that's like this thick, you're really validating all the elements, because sometimes what happens, it's like a runaway train where there's some new research on a particular supplement, a nutrient, and next thing you know, a bunch of people are pushing it out there, but what was actually published in research and what actually gets to the bottle might be two different things.
And that's what I care about the most. In my business practice now with specialty nutrition consulting, that's exactly the place where I live, where the science is actually proving things work, specific nutrients, specific ingredients for specific health outcomes, and bringing that into commercial markets. And we sift through a lot of garbage to get to the rubies in that pile.
So let's talk about, we'll start off on the negative side, get to the positive side. What you talk about, you sift through a lot of garbage. What are things that a consumer who's really interested in benefiting from buying, nutrient supplementation, et cetera, what are some of the things to look for and maybe things to avoid?
Well, first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're getting something that works and you're getting the clinically studied amount of what works. So I'll give you an example. Advil. Advil works. It'll cure your headache. But if you take 1,000th of an Advil, it's not going to do anything. So you want to make sure you're not only getting the right things that work, and that is where clinical research comes in. So when you look at a clinical research study on a nutritional substance or a nutritional combination, you're going to see that they'll disclose the amount that was used, the exact material that was used, and that's what you really want to replicate. And a lot of companies don't use those. They'll sell you 1,000th of an Advil equivalent, or potato tops are poisonous and the potato is nutritious. They'll sell you potato tops and put potato on the label. So you got to really watch out for that.
Should I be able to, as a consumer, if I'm buying a supplement, even if I'm seeing it at a retail store, say, that looks interesting, but maybe I can go online and look it up. Will good supplement providers have binders online or research online that sort of correlates with what's in the bottle that you're buying from them?
Yes, and I would really encourage, if you're thinking about buying a nutritional supplement and taking it, you're doing that for a reason. You want to help your health and you're looking for a specific benefit from that. I would want to make sure I knew that benefit had been validated in others, and that's why companies do clinical trials. Now, sometimes there's a consumer brand that's using ingredient brands. Often the ingredients companies, which is a different company that's being put together in the consumer label, it's often the ingredient companies that are actually doing the consumer research. So I would look for links to that. I would look for actual disclosure of the studies. The beauty of the scientific method, Pat, is that things are peer-reviewed before they're published. So if you see a published clinical trial, you can be sure that it was done and it was also reviewed by other scientists and the peers before it was published. So you can have confidence in that outcome, and that's what I would trust.
Now, you know me, and I'm sort of skeptical of the skeptics. The scientists, and who worship at the altar of the peer-reviewed study. I'm not against it. I've helped fund controlled research, randomized controlled clinical trials that are blinded. I think there's some validity to that, but I also know that space of science is somewhat political. Sometimes there's some malfeasance in it, et cetera. But certainly it's the best available stuff we can look to try to draw some conclusions. But what I've also known is that science seems to maybe migrate. There are things that come along that like are fads, and next thing you know, they fade, and then it's the next thing. So what do you think are some of the fundamentals that are here to stay no matter what, whether you like fish oil, keto, other such things that came in, became very popular, very quick, coconut oil, very quickly. And then, what do you think are like foundational and are going to stay there? And what kind of things you think might be faddish?
Well, the scientific method is not faddish. So it's a breakthrough in humanity because it turns the I told you so method of knowledge gaining.
Yeah.
And that's why we thought the earth was flat for, the first 10,000 years of human history to, hey, we're going to assume we're wrong. That's a humble assumption. And then you do an experiment and you find out if you're wrong. Sometimes you're right, and that's the scientific method. So obviously I'm a big fan of the scientific method. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. And it's a way to really prove things. The other thing that's happening in this field is the sensors and the ability to tell, just even on your cell phone, what's going on in your own body. The cost of tests is going down. The sensors are getting better on your own phone. So you can do a scientific experiment of one on yourself and find out what's working for you as well.
Right.
Now, clinical research does get twisted around by companies, sometimes by using the wrong stuff, sometimes by using not enough. So that's clearly the case. But a lot of these trends start with anecdotes. So there's these stories, these fantastic stories of, somebody went on the keto diet and lost a lot of weight, or somebody, ate coconut oil and their cholesterol went down, whatever the story is. And so people are attracted to these stories, and eventually those stories are kind of the wide end of the funnel for scientific research. And there's a lot of things that have started off as anecdotes that have later been proven by science.
So I look at two broad categories when I look at nutrition and supplementation. Tell me if you see it the same way. There's sort of the wellness proactive side of it, saying I don't really have a health problem, like somebody like myself who takes a lot of supplementation, but I don't really have like a disease or a condition.
Preventive kind of.
Yeah. I'm kind of like being proactive, saying, hey, I'm into longevity, I'm into good energy every single day, etc. And then there's people that are have some real challenges, maybe even serious diseases, maybe even something that's maybe not a life-threatening disease or an illness, but they've got some challenges with their gut or their heart or some other problems, and they'll target supplementation specifically to address that. Is that sort of how the nutrition world works in your view? They have those two types of things?
Yeah, it's pretty close to how I would understand it to be working. And if you think about what they share a proactive mindset. So those two groups, though, there's also people who are trying to improve their athletic performance or sports performance, if you want to add that as a third group.
Yep.
But what they all have in common is a proactivity. So when I was at GNC and you had a woman who's worried about osteoporosis and a bodybuilder who's trying to make the team and somebody who's trying to keep their brain sharp, like those people are very different demographically, but they have a very strong commonality in that they're looking to proactively help their health somehow, either to address something that's wrong, and they're going to do that through trial and error, and that's valid. That's a valid way. That's a scientific experiment of one.
Right.
If you think about the spectrum of food on one hand and pharmaceutical medicine on the other hand, proven RX drugs, for example, and you say, hey, there's a cherry, and somebody ate the tart cherry, feels like their inflammation went down and they feel looser or something, that's the beginning of kind of this area in between food and pharma. And my field, effective nutrition, is really closer to that edge where there's more clinical proof, but something can go from food into this kind of supplement area just when people say, let's find out what's in that cherry that's making people less stiff.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about maybe the more proactive approach, but then I really want to zero in on people who have specific health challenges that they're trying to solve through nutritional means or more natural means than, say, a pharmacological approach. So starting with the kind of the general wellness orientation. One of the things that I keep hearing controversy about, and I'm getting varied opinions on this from experts, people who have expertise in the field, are sort of like these very inexpensive big box store multivitamins that you'll see sold on TV, and they have different levels for different ages, etc. Do you find that they're valuable, completely invaluable, or maybe somewhere in between?
Well, the lower price you're paying, the more they've optimized for the cost of that product. That's in general. That applies to cars as well as vitamins or anything else, right? So there are differences in the nutritional needs between different demographics, a child or a woman versus a man, older or younger. Like there's differences in the nutritional needs of those different demographic groups. When you are looking at nutritional deficiencies, you want to just get up to the level of kind of the RDA and make sure you're avoiding any deficiencies. And USDA survey studies say that like there are deficiencies of certain nutrients in certain groups. So that's a valid approach. If you're really looking to be proactive and more on the therapeutic side, those types of things probably aren't going to be enough, but they are valid for avoiding deficiencies, making sure you're getting a foundational level of nutrition, micronutrition in particular, every single day.
You brought up RDA. Do you feel like the RDA has got it fairly well wired as far as what the minimums are, or do you think that they might be off in some areas?
You know, I think that there's a really good process for determining what the daily values are, which is what people think of as the RDAs.
Which is a recommended daily allowance,
Right.
in case anybody doesn't
Reference
understand.
daily values of what you're supposed to get and not get below that, especially for avoiding deficiency. There's expert committees that meet on that periodically every few years, and they actually just made some adjustments and raised some that, in my view, should have been higher.
Right.
But I think there's a good process for that. But remember, you're looking at a baseline of nutrition for those that establishes a kind of a deficiency avoidance paradigm, and that's really important for general health in the average population.
Now, when we get into the more targeted sort of people are saying, I'm looking for nutritional solutions to my health problems versus a pharmacological solution. How do you see that world right now, and where do you think it's going?
It's really interesting, Pat, and that's one of my favorite areas in this whole field because it's really not mostly the RDA type vitamins that are getting the most interest in this area. So there's a lot of research going on carotenoids, which are antioxidants that are in fruits and vegetables, on fiber, on prebiotics, on probiotics, on things that are omega-3 fatty acids that aren't necessarily like vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C type alphabet labels. That is where it's really important, whether you're trying to be proactive or address a health concern, to understand what the research has really done on. Because there's a big difference between eating a carrot and taking, lutein for your eyes or something like that that's to avoid macular degeneration, which it's proven to slow. So that is where it's really critical. These non-ABC type vitamins is where it's really critical to follow the research.
So let's say, I'm going to go into a couple of systems and you tell me what you think the prevailing wisdom is on this. Let's start with gut and gut health. People who just generally have maybe some, like an irritable bowel syndrome, maybe Crohn's disease, maybe GERD. What are some of the things that are showing promise in the supplement world for people who have those struggles?
So gut health is one of those experiential products. So if you're worried about your cellular health, you're not necessarily going to feel that right away. But if you have a gut problem, you really want to get that corrected and you can feel it right away. So it's visceral, Pat.
Yeah.
So most of the foundational research that's really now coming into the limelight is in the probiotics area. And I really think that's the tip of the iceberg. We're starting to find out there's between 10 and 100 trillion probiotic microbial cells in your gut. It could be 10 times more in a healthy gut than in your actual body of human cells, so who's who?
Right.
I think the probiotics are a really good starting point, but I am very skeptical that you're going to drop 10 billion probiotics into a 100 trillion system and really change it. I think it's much more important, and where the research I think is going is on a whole gut approach, which includes fiber, which includes prebiotics. So if you think about creating a nicer environment or better environment, a more robust environment for that rainforest inside of your gut, then all 100 trillion can be healthier and work better together. Remember, the system's evolved over a long period of time.
Right.
So I think that a whole microbiome approach, a whole gut approach, emphasis on fiber, emphasis on prebiotics, which are what probiotics eat, that's their lunch,
Right.
are going to be much more important in the future to cultivating that rainforest inside of you than a simple, here's a probiotic and don't worry about the rest approach.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, supplementation is not going to make up for inadequacies in what you're eating and your general lifestyle.
Yeah, I actually recommend people rotate probiotics if they want to take probiotic supplements, so they can get a big diversity of them, but always eat enough fiber. I mean, in America, the average person gets about half of the USDA recommended amount of fiber. It's 30 grams, and the average person gets about 15 grams. And fiber is also what keeps things moving, what your probiotics eat. And I think it's not only the key to a healthy gut, it's the key to happiness, actually.
Yeah, well, yeah, indeed. And let's talk about something that you have particular expertise in also, since we're kind of talking about gut and microbes and all that kind of stuff. Fermented vitamins. I've seen a lot more of them where there's a fermentation process that's inculcated into the source materials that are going into the nutrient. Holds a lot of promise. You like that? What's your view on that?
There's 2 or 3 different technologies that take vitamins and put them into a more body-ready matrix because they've already been kind of pre-digested by either a yeast in fermentation or a root of a plant or a berry of a plant or something. And I think those are very interesting. I think they are more body-ready. I think there's going to be a lot more research to be done to show how, exactly what the bioavailability increase might be. There's a few substances that have done that with. So I'm a fan of the approach in terms of making it more body ready, but it doesn't change the RDA or daily value for those because that research has yet to be done.
Does the body perceive that more like food than maybe just a straight source nutrient that's not fermented?
That's the thought.
That's the thought, okay. Yeah, so you're saying that it's kind of emerging science right now.
It's emerging science. Now, there has been a little bit done in that area on certain minerals, so it's not unproven,
right,
but it's just early in the process.
Yeah, and so now let's talk about heart health. There's a lot of stuff about ubiquinol, CoQ10, other nutrients that maybe help support better heart health. Somebody who's got, problems with their heart, maybe they've got bad cholesterol profile, maybe they've got arrhythmias, what have you. What are people taking around those types of problems with their cardiac health?
People take specific supplements to help both the energetic systems around the heart. So the energy factories in your cells are called mitochondria, and coenzyme Q10 is very important in having the mitochondria be able to make energy. Your heart never really gets a break. It's beating the whole time.
The whole time.
Awake or asleep, right? There's no rest for the heart.
Right.
So there's a really interesting study that actually came out today from
Today?
Today.
This is like breaking news?
Big group in Sweden, and they had done a study with coenzyme Q10 and selenium together 10 years ago, and they did a follow-up that they published today that showed that at a 10-year follow-up, the people who had taken these supplements for a couple of years had a dramatically, I think a 40% reduction that much later, 10 years later, in cardiac events, and even I think it was cardiac mortality. And so they're analyzing that. That study was done in Sweden. I can give you the references.
Yeah,
if you're
40% is quite significant.
Very significant.
And
it was after 10 years later. So
and there's this sort of very significant challenge from the pharmaceutical approach toward people who have high cholesterol, where they're giving them statins, which incidentally I think is a complete farce. And we don't have to go down that rabbit hole right now, but I think why statins are given and what they're claiming their benefits are not right. But putting that aside for a moment, there is also data saying that statins, have a depressive effect on coenzyme Q10, right? So is it especially important for somebody who's taking statin medication that they be supplementing with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not a medical doctor, but the research is clear that statins deplete coenzyme Q10, period. That's clear.
Which is taking the energy away from your heart.
And so if you think about how those mitochondria are the energy factory of your cells trying to create energy to keep everything moving right and the electrical system around your heart to keep pumping correctly, you need coenzyme Q10 for that. And if you're depleting that, that is the textbook case for providing a rationale for supplementation, especially in combination with a pharmaceutical that has that known side effect.
Yeah, so that critical one there. Now, you're talking about the mitochondrial health around the heart. I know that what's becoming extremely popular right now is, in general, mitochondrial health for the whole body. So are there other supplements people are looking to for, better energy and having their mitochondrial health improve?
And that's one of my favorite topics, Pat. So this mitochondrial energy story is almost every cell. I think red blood cells are the only ones that don't have. Every cell in your body, except for those, has this energy, these energy factories in them, the mitochondria. And there's a lot of different theories of aging, but one of them that I think has a lot of credibility and a lot of promise is this mitochondrial your mitochondria get less efficient as you age. Keeping your energetic systems running is really important, and there's a lot of really interesting research. It's known that NAD, which is one of these chemicals involved in mitochondrial energy declines precipitously as you age. So if a 6-year-old, they're always bouncing around, they have a really high level of NAD. We've all seen that with our own kids.
Sure.
But it's half that much by the time you're 30, and it keeps declining with age. So I am fascinated with this emerging research in the field of NAD precursors, which are simple metabolites of B vitamins. The most effective one that I've seen research on is nicotinamide riboside, and it is phenomenal. There's over 160 clinical studies going on around the world just on that one substance, mostly in major medical labs, universities around the world, to see how we can impact these metabolic processes through mitochondrial energy and how it might have impact in various health systems in the human body.
Well, I'm taking one of your supplements daily right now, and absolutely noticeable as far as my energy levels. I mean, I'm very sensitive with my body, and I could tell that that's working. And you have me taking that in combination with another supplement that helps to support my liver. So let's talk about liver health and liver detox.
So that's another, unfortunately, favorite topic for me, because my interest in this area was born out of my own problem. So, as you know, the liver is, everything kind of goes to the liver and has to be detoxified. So your liver can be overwhelmed, and giving it the support that it needs to not only detoxify, there's only one place in your body that detoxification happens, and that's your liver. And that's a chemical process that's done there. So supporting that process is really important, and there are nutritional substrates that can make sure if you run out of any of those components that you need, you can't actually detoxify things that you need to detoxify. So making sure they're there is really important. The other thing that's important is when you get in your gut, you want to make sure when the detoxified things are in your gut that they leave. Yeah. So that's fiber, and that's also some other nutritional substances like calcium D-glucarate that can bind that and make sure that it's leaving your body, not just getting reabsorbed.
Yeah, and that's critical. And I guess there are known, published research that says here's the known combination of factors that have a particular effect on an individual. And I don't think you formulate anything where you don't find that kind of data before you put it together and formulate.
Well, my business practice for the last 15 years has been specifically putting together clinical research around specific desired health outcomes and documenting with clinical research how what's inside these products affect the structures and functions of the human body. And it's a fascinating field, and you're seeing more interest from large medical food companies come in, infant nutrition companies coming in. Remember when infant formula got DHA added to it, that's validating the omega-3 story. So that kind of thing is happening. There's nutritional substances that are actually going all the way and becoming drugs now. So this evolution to substantiated combinations that really can be shown to help your health is a field that is growing by leaps and bounds.
Yeah, and another part of what your expertise or where it lies is also creating the brand around it. And that's that's what I'm saying. Usually you got a brand person, you got a manufacturing person, you've got a business plan type of person, but somehow you've been able to integrate all these things together and really bring things to the market. And the other thing that I know about you is that you genuinely care about the impact it's having on people. I just happen to know you well enough to know that that's you're very purpose driven in that respect. So in a few moments, just kind of summarize for me what you think the future is. Is the nutrition and supplement industry, is that going to go to better places than where it is today, or you see it declining? What do you think the future is?
Well, as you know, Pat, I'm deeply passionate about this intersection between nutrition and health and outcomes for people. I've had my own beneficial experiences from it. I've spent my entire career trying to bring these combinations to people. And you can't do that without putting it into a brand that they're going to be attracted to and buy and try, right? So it's all part of the same equation for me. I am very optimistic on the future of nutritional therapies, I'll call it, because I think that not only is there an increasing body of research showing that certain substances actually can have specific helpful influences on your health, but also people are now having access to their own measures. So you don't have to hunt and peck and try with no measures and just basing on how you feel these supplement additives to whatever else you're doing. You can actually measure that now. You can go get blood tests for a lot less money. You can. There's a lot more integrative doctors that can help you find that. There's like I say, sensors on the cell phones that'll allow you to find out, and those are just going to get better. So it's an incredibly exciting time in my field of effective nutrition because the research is validating it and people are wanting to use every tool in the toolbox. It's not actually one or the other. They might be on statin drugs and want to take CoQ10. They might have some kind of health challenge that they're getting medical treatment for, but want to supplement and give themselves the best possible shot. That's great, and I think that's just going to continue to grow in popularity as people are able to benefit from it.
Well, I could say that, first of all, I love the characterization of effective nutrition, right? It's kind of saying, hey, this is what we do. We're not putting anybody else down, but this is kind of where we focus on what we know is effective. And I appreciate you taking the time and your very packed schedule to sit down and share all this wisdom and experience with us. And I'll look forward maybe to updates from you from time to time that we can share.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for having me, Pat.
Very few people in the world have as much broad-based knowledge about supplementation as Greg Horn. Really glad I could share his wisdom with you. You realize you're being marketed to constantly, right? It's very true of supplements. You should understand the marketing because if you do, you're going to become a better consumer when making your purchase. Next up, we have Buck Rizvi, who comes from the marketing world in supplements, so he can give you some inside knowledge about how you're marketed to, what to look for, and what to avoid. Enjoy this interview. Buck, thanks so much for coming in and spending some time with us.
It's my pleasure, Patrick.
So tell us about your background. How'd you get involved in the work you do?
Wow. So I was a corporate executive. Spent 21 years in sales and marketing, high tech. And I noticed somewhere along the line that I was getting gray around the temples and felt I needed to do something from an anti-aging standpoint, even when I was maybe 25, 26 years old. And so I became fascinated with dietary supplements, a user of dietary supplements, high dose supplements. There's some companies, there was a book I read called Life Extension. And it was a great book, fascinating read, and they actually sold supplements back in the 90s. I was a customer. So eventually, as I was looking for opportunities to leave my day job, I was happy and well paid as a corporate executive, but I always wanted to have my own thing.
Right.
I found that maybe the health space, having a health brand, would be the way I'd want to go. So I did some research, sort of as a side gig, as I was VP of Business Development for a software company in New York, and I was able to research, identify a market to go after in the digestive health space, get a product formulated, manufactured, and I knew something at that point about online marketing, so I could bring my skills about online marketing and apply that to this business. Right. And I got lucky, and I was successful really out the gate with that business. I'd tried other businesses before, so it was sort of like, wasn't quite an overnight success. Right.
So what was it that you saw in the market or the demand that caused you to say, hey, I think this is something I want to go into? I
was looking for a couple of companies that were selling multi-seven figures, if not 8 figures or more. And I found 2 companies doing, some companies are very funny. They're willing to brag about their sales volume. Right. Kind of like McDonald's did with millions and now billions sold. Right. And so I found one company that was actually showing you how many orders or how many customers they had at any given time. You could sort of track day to day, week to week, how much they were selling if they were being honest about it. Right. And I inferred what their volume was. And then there was another company I called up, an 800 number, and chatted with the agent. Right. And she actually shared some data with me about what their sales volume was. Wow. Okay. So I realized that both of these companies were selling over $10 million a year online of products in the market that I wanted to go into.
And what year was this?
This is 2005.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So what evolved? So you found that these companies were doing well with what they were doing. You saw kind of, I guess, a market opportunity. You approached it more from strategic business orientation as compared to saying you had a background, in biochemistry and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little different, approach into the marketplace.
Yes.
So what did you create and launch into the world?
Yeah, it's funny. In a sense, I was a health researcher, not a health practitioner.
Right.
You know, my mom's a medical doctor and my dad's a PhD, but I was, I don't have a credential. So I was passionate about it, and I realized I wasn't the I wasn't the scientist. So I
Right.
positioned myself as the researcher, and we developed the first product, and this is the first brand that I launched, and subsequently I've launched another brand, was in the digestive health space. And that product, I brought together a team, formulators, manufacturers, and help with marketing too, copywriting. Back then, I think it was easier
Yeah.
to market online,
Right.
and times were different, very much different than they are today.
The digestive health space is still very high demand, right?
Yes.
A lot of people very troubled. Microbiome, very popular
Yeah.
subject topic right now.
Absolutely.
And we could talk about a lot of reasons, why people are having trouble digestively.
Yeah.
So now with all the research you've done, actually, bringing products to the marketplace, et cetera, what are the pitfalls? Like, what should people be looking for? Because there are a lot of, how can I put it, unethical players maybe entering the space trying to, get rich quick. And
Yes.
so what do people look for to say that they're not being scammed?
So we pivoted a little bit because I think there's more knowledge about what the issues are with the digestive tract and the likelihood that some people have things like leaky gut,
Yep.
hyperpermeability, intestinal hyperpermeability, which is a mouthful to be able to say that, which can lead to inflammation and autoimmune disease. So disease really starts in the gut, in the digestive tract, for a lot of these diseases. So I decided that this was something that we wanted to focus on, help people understand that this is a problem, and provide both a supplement approach and lifestyle education, because you really need both
Yes.
for this to work. And but there are problems with digestive health supplements, things like probiotics, and we've done a lot of research since recently in developing probiotics that will survive the acid in the stomach,
Right.
that are effective for treatment of various issues such as comfort, weight loss, for example, and also helping heal the lining of the digestive tract. So one issue specifically with probiotics is organisms don't survive. People have not used an enteric coating, for example, on the delivery mechanism. They don't have enough of the organism in the capsules. There's a number of things that can go wrong. So unfortunately, there are companies that are cutting corners.
Yeah.
If you look at probiotics as one category.
And there's not really danger there as much as
No.
just you're wasting money is the issue, right?
It's a whole lot of nothing, right?
Yeah.
You're basically swallowing dead organism at that
Right.
point and excreting it.
Yeah.
And what you really want, something that we've done at Real Dose Nutrition, which is my other brand, is we've taken. I'm not trying to sell my product, but
No, I
it's
get it, I get
it's just an idea of the levels that we've gone to, multiple strains to address different conditions in the body, such as digestive comfort, blood glucose regulation, that sort of thing. Making sure that we've stacked it with enough of the organism that if there's always some die-off when you take the supplement, and making sure that it's in the right type of capsule, enteric coating, which will survive the stomach acid and make it into the small intestine. That's another example. And then the other thing is we put it into a double-lined foil blister pack under a nitrogen blanket. And that oxygen and moisture are the mortal enemy of probiotics. So a lot of people will take their probiotic, they'll take it off the store shelf, or maybe it's on the store shelf, right there, and they will open it up and stick it into their cupboard in a hot, humid condition in Oxford, Mississippi, or something, right? And that unfortunately, moisture, heat will cause die-off and lead to further problems.
Is it recommended that if they're not blister packed like yours are, that it's kept in a refrigerator once it's opened, or does that help?
That's one way. Yeah, that can help. That still can be some moisture issues and things like that. They're doing some special encapsulation of the organisms to help address that issue. And I'm not saying that all companies are charlatans when it comes to this. It's just that if you're willing to take it to the next level and ensure that people are going to get what they expect, and generally that helps ensure the outcome. Because a lot of these strains, for example, are clinically studied, and but it's under very controlled conditions. You have the living organism, maybe had a specific delivery mechanism, and we're trying to reproduce that in the environment of the clinical study.
With this type of a category, that we're talking about probiotics. I know that very often there's a lot of brands out there, but several brands have the same manufacturer.
Yes.
And what happens is they're just labeled different ways and different marketing copy, but it's essentially the same product. So what happens when somebody like you comes along and said, the typical manufacturing practice on this is not really what we want to do. We need to kind of step that up. Do you have to source out a special manufacturer to be able to produce something like that, or how do you do it?
Yeah, sometimes you have to shop manufacturers. And unfortunately, many companies, and maybe I'll just dive right into picking on some folks without naming names, is that there's a plethora of brands on Amazon. Amazon has become the supplement superstore.
Right.
But with that comes a lot of companies that are just mimicking each other. They're copying each other, and they're going, a lot of them, to the low cost bidder.
Right.
So there are a few, I might say, unscrupulous manufacturers that are producing a lot of these supplements. Many of them you're finding on places like Amazon that may have be questionable in terms of manufacturing practices that were used, the dosage of the ingredients, the survivability, if we're talking about probiotics, that sort of thing. If we're looking for a special manufacturing technique, like I mentioned, that nitrogen blanket with the blister pack, that's a special, the fly-by-nights are not going to have that capability.
Right.
So we do have to shop that around. And we typically, from my perspective, we go and find the best manufacturers.
Right.
We're willing, it's funny, you talk to some companies and they're almost apologizing for, well, this is going to cost more. Are you sure you want to do that?
Right.
And from our perspective, it's, well, how can we not do this?
Right.
And if we take the time to explain why we're doing it, then the consumer is educated, they're willing to spend more.
Yeah, well, in essence, you're actually, it's costing you more when you're spending money and getting nothing for it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's actually a cost,
right?
Not a benefit.
Yep.
Does Amazon have any vetting whatsoever, or is it basically everybody just kind of set up shop there, and they don't really have a methodology for vetting the quality or the truthfulness of what's represented?
I would say that they do not have, and they're not in a position to vet the products, specifically supplements or any other product, really, for that matter. I think they're reactive, and they look at the reviews that are showing up and other types of feedback that they're receiving. Sure, they're going to look at things like the product listings and the descriptions and the pictures and so forth, and they need to police that, and they should, with respect to claims. And they probably do a good job, probably using robots to do that sort of thing, AI. But in terms of the quality of the product, the efficacy of the product, the dosage of the ingredients, and there's no way that they can police that for the thousands of products they have available.
They also, I see sometimes say, Amazon's choice, and is that just based on volume of reviews and quality and that type of thing, or?
It's funny because if you search for a product by name, like a brand name, you may have noticed this, that very often that will show up as an Amazon's choice for that brand name. Because you were searching for that brand. So of course Amazon's going to label it, and I think they've realized that if they put the Amazon's choice there, people feel like, oh, this must be good. I should go ahead and buy it. So in some cases, Amazon's choice just shows up because you were searching for that brand.
Interesting.
You have to watch that because you have to see what you were searching for. If you're searching for a generic category, such as probiotic, then yeah, you'll see something that shows up as Amazon's choice. I suspect it's primarily driven off of sales volume.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a review component, but they're black box when it comes to how they calculate that.
Yeah. What I've noticed is I've been doing my own research, trying to say, okay, because you're right. Amazon's become a major, or maybe the major distributor for supplements, and so if I go on there and look, I'll say, okay, it seems to be some relationship between the amount of reviews,
feedback,
because if there's only a dozen or 50 reviews as compared to 9,000, and then so it has something to do with the volume and the quality of the reviews, I'm guessing,
right?
And that's probably not necessarily good enough. I think people have to dig deeper.
They really should.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous thing because I know a little too much under the covers in terms of unscrupulous supplement marketers that are gaming the system.
Right.
And they're really good. And there's a whole dark web, if you will, of what you need to do to game the review system in Amazon. And it's absolutely applicable to dietary supplements. So you really don't know. If you see one vendor that has 2,200 reviews, 4.7 out of 5 stars, you think, wow, that's great. And compare it to someone else that might have a few hundred, little distribution, maybe it's 4.1.
Right.
But that 4.1 might be better. It's just that they've not done the dark web gaming of the review system.
Right, yeah, so this is where people have to learn more. There's a lot of buyer beware here.
Right.
So now if we talk about not just gut health, but the general supplement industry, which you have already started to, what are some of the things that a consumer can look for to vet their products a little better?
It's interesting because as a manufacturer and a marketer of supplements, I'd rather not have to be dependent upon other brands for my product. But there is something to be said for branded ingredients, high quality branded ingredients. It's sort of like if you buy a computer from HP and it has Intel, right? So you kind of look for the AMD or Intel. We're educated about that if we're into technology. And the same thing can be said for supplements, although the consumers are not as educated about what brands are good. But the good news is that many of these ingredient labs are doing a good job.
Yeah.
They are identifying unique botanicals. They are extracting them in novel ways. They're subjecting them to human clinical trials. They're getting published in peer-reviewed magazines and periodicals. And so that leads to then substantiated health claims, which is always good, right? If you can substantiate something and someone can look at that article or maybe kind of a researcher vet it, it makes people feel better. And then for companies like me, I look for those types of ingredients. Generally, I look for more some newer entrants because I like to be first to market with some things. And I also look to have more than one. If I'm addressing a problem such as digestive discomfort or maybe a cognitive focus, that type of thing, I typically look for ingredients that address more than one pathway, more than one way of addressing the problem. We sell weight management solutions at Real Dose Nutrition. Our flagship product has 3 different ingredients that tackle the problem from 3 different angles, and 2 of those ingredients are branded, like I described. Both of those branded ingredients have human clinical studies that show efficacy when it comes to weight loss. So that's I know I threw a couple things in there, but that's how I approach it. Is one with branded ingredients, and then the other is a multiple pathway approach. So I think what happens, and I see this a lot on Amazon.
Can you give me an example of a branded ingredient like that's in your product?
We have a product called Svetol, Svetol, and that's a green coffee extract. It's made from green coffee beans from Madagascar. It's sort of a very unique type of bean, and then it's extracted in a lab in France, and then brought and sold in the United States to companies like us that incorporate it into a weight management solution. So because it's guaranteed to give you this same dose as used in the clinical study, you're very likely to get the same blood sugar regulation, the same weight loss benefits, et cetera.
And consistency is an issue, right? Because
Totally.
if source elements are shifting, if it's like the shifting sands of what's going into a bottle, then you might get good results from one bottle, and then the next one not so much.
I mean, I hate to pick on Amazon, but there are some good examples. I think I read an article that said maybe 25% of the products on Amazon are Chinese knockoffs. I don't know if that's true or not, right? But you have to believe that some of these things are also permeating into the dietary supplement space. And so when and the same thing happens with botanicals. So we use an ingredient. I'm going to use an example: Rhodiola rosea. We source ours. It's a very expensive ingredient, and it's a couple $100 a kilogram, something of that nature in terms of cost. But you can get that same one ingredient from the Altai mountain regions of Russia, which is where we get it. And rhodiola grows at high altitude. It's a very hardy plant, and that's what gives it its health benefits. But you can also get it. You can get Chinese versions of this ingredient. And I'm not trying to pick on China, but unfortunately, there's a lot of shenanigans going on coming out of there. And you can get that instead of $200, you spend $30 per kilogram. Which do you think is going to give you the action?
Of course, but both bottles are making the same claim.
Of course,
and
it's rhodiola rosea.
Yeah. Right. So that's what makes it difficult.
Yeah.
So this maybe ties in. So what's the story behind Real Dose? I mean, why did you select that brand, and what's its mission?
So Real Dose Nutrition is our tagline is the right ingredients at the real dose, and the mission really was to address the shenanigans that I mentioned have been going on in the dietary supplement space, where people are making health claims that are not substantiated. They are claiming to have ingredients in their products. Sometimes the ingredients are either not there. There's a term in the industry called pixie dusting, where they sprinkle it on and say it's in there, but there's not enough to provide any benefit. Maybe you can test for it, but it's not there at a significant dosage.
Right.
Or it's a generic ingredient. So we talked about the Altai mountain regions versus something sold off a truck, that came from China. So we wanted to address that specifically by having products that multiple pathway, certainly that work. Every ingredient we select has been proven with human clinical studies to be effective that have been published in peer-reviewed journals. And we include the same dosage as used in the studies.
And I was saying that's probably the key.
That's the key.
Real dose.
Real dose, right?
Because you find that particular nutrients are popularized based on research that might emerge, and then there's a kind of a gold rush, and the opportunity hounds are going in saying, okay, I'm going to say I've got this ingredient in here, but it doesn't reflect what was actually published as far as the dosage that was used. So that's why that's the thing that you said, hey, this is the thing that we want to focus on.
Right. You can be guaranteed that you're going to get the same result as was published in the study.
Yeah.
And then we take it a step further. We do, and I think this is something that really where the industry needs to head as a whole, because the industry, I know the FDA and the FTC do police the dietary supplement space, but a lot of it is self-regulated.
Yes.
And if we do things such as batch testing of our products to make sure that they're free of contaminants and that they have the dosage that we're indicating on the bottle, that would go a long way to addressing issues.
What percentage of the industry would you say does that?
Small fraction.
Really?
Small fraction. Oh yeah. I'll take that back. Every ingredient that is used in a product should have a certificate of analysis. And so that's an industry standard. But to take that a step further and do a batch test on a finished product, that is very unusual.
Right.
So not every company does that. The better companies do, but all of the small, probably fly-by-nights that you might see on Amazon, the vast majority are not doing that.
And that's the outcome, and that's what's actually going in the bottle that you want to be testing as compared to saying the source before it gets manufactured. That's two different things.
Yeah, and even those could be rubber stamped. You don't know.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because I think there is this misinformation that's promulgated.
Yeah.
That the nutrition industry is unregulated, which is not true. I mean, we've had several conversations now through this process that there's an extraordinary amount of regulation, but within the confines of that regulation, there's still a lot of wiggle room, I guess.
Yes.
And that's why it's just not as cut and dry as one might think. As far as I'm told I should take this particular nutrient, I'll just buy the cheapest one I can find, and
should work.
Yeah, it should work, and not at all. And at the same time, just because you're spending more money doesn't necessarily mean that this is a great product.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's and what I've been trying to do in part through the course of this project is saying, okay, so now the consumer is going to be able to know how to navigate these waters and get there. And it's just not that simple.
It isn't that simple. And I tell you, if you're walking the store, I remember going from 2005 to today.
Yeah.
And back then you'd find a tiny little supplement aisle, maybe, in your grocery store, and now they're just massive sections, right? So if you're buying your supplements at Costco or Walmart or your local pharmacy, it's tough. It really is. And the sex appeal of the packaging usually is what drives the visual aspect of it as opposed to what's inside and whether it's been tested.
Yeah, and that's good branding, and exactly. They say they'd rather spend their money outside the package because that's what's going to get it to sell as compared to inside, which is what is going to matter.
Now, what's interesting is that the online growth of the dietary supplement space has both a good side and a bad side, right? So we talk about the Amazon issue, but there's also, for companies like a Real Dose Nutrition, an opportunity to educate, to tell a story, not be so much focused on sexy packaging, but to help the consumer make a wise decision. And that's what we focus on. I see a lot of other brands doing the same. I think that is a bright spot in the space. And so if consumers are willing to look at, it's almost like looking at nutrition facts. My wife is a nutritionist, but a lot of people that are not will still look at how much sugar, how much fat's in here, does it have any trans fat, those kinds of things. And there are ways that you can do that with now, supplement labels. And you're starting to see these branded ingredients show up on the product. I think as the consumers become educated about the branded versions of green coffee and other types of products, I think that's a good thing.
What percentage of supplements now are sold online versus retail?
It's a small percentage compared to
it's not like
the
50-50 or anything.
No.
So still the vast majority
but it's growing.
retail.
It's growing the fastest. Certainly.
It's escalating up, but right now it's still mostly retail. And then, of course, there's a lot of people who get their supplements through a doctor's office, the varying types of
That's actually a rapidly growing space.
Yeah, I'm seeing that too.
The practitioner space and high-quality companies out there that are allowing doctors to private label their products. There's a couple brands that I'm familiar with and I feel very good about. So I see that as a bright spot. Now, those supplements are premium and very expensive.
Yep.
The docs need to eat too. They need to pay for their kids' braces. But I mean, the good news is those are quality products, and I see docs generally going in the right direction with that.
Yeah, and I've noticed that typically, a doctor, if they are going to become a distributor, if you will, that they want to vet a good product. They don't want junk coming out of their office, so they are typically premium products.
Absolutely.
What are you seeing in the future? Like, where's this industry going?
Yeah, so I see there's an opportunity, and this is something that we are working on, for there to be a tighter connection between the brand and the consumer. I think right now with companies like Amazon serving as intermediaries and distributors, that's disconnected because Amazon really doesn't want the merchants to have the direct relationship with the consumer. And I think that's a disservice to the consumer. So I'm seeing that the industry will have a tighter connection. I feel like I have empathy with my customers, and that's why I'm in this space. So they'll be able to through that, through the channels of social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, that can be used for good. I know a lot of people are concerned about social media and the negative sides of it, but I think there's a very positive aspect to it as well. So I think that's going to continue to grow. The smart brands are going to leverage this, and it's actually creating an opportunity to outmaneuver, be more agile than the big companies like the bears that are trying to buy things up and think they're going to dominate. So certainly they're going to do very, very well. But there's still a lot of opportunity for small companies like us to enter, to educate, and to thrive. And I love that. I think it creates a very healthy ecosystem that's pro-consumer.
Should a consumer of supplements feel something? Like a lot of times they're saying, well, I just want to stay healthy. I'm proactive, and I take whatever I take. Should they actually feel something, or that's like usually the controversial question. You should feel more energy. You should feel this. You should sleep better, etc. What are your thoughts?
So that's actually a little secret of the if you're good in the dietary supplement space and you're developing. I have a philosophy of, if I'm developing a product that I'm going to spend money to market as a sort of a front-end product, as a flagship product for my brand, then I'm typically trying to address I call it a house on fire problem, like something that someone really wants to solve. This is joint issues or focus, memory, heart issues, those kinds of things. And but in addition to that, I do like to have, and the industry calls this experiential. You like to have something that people are going to feel. And that's actually a little secret of some now you have to watch that, because sometimes the supplement companies will put in things that are really, maybe unnecessary, like caffeine, a stimulant.
Right.
It's like, oh, I feel the zip. I'm going to take this. Sometimes they overload it with B12 and it becomes like an energy drink,
Right.
Things of that nature. Should you feel that? I guess it depends.
Right.
We like to use ingredients. I mentioned the rhodiola rosea, which is an adaptogen. That's really not a stimulant,
Right.
but you will feel an energy boost. You will feel a mood boost. We feel like ingredients like that have a great place in products like ours. So used responsibly, I think you could formulate something that gives a benefit for the condition you're addressing,
Right.
and allows people to feel the experiential.
Yeah. So here's the problem. Every time I have somebody sit down and tell me about their product, what they formulated, or varying, individual nutrients or whatever, it's like, oh, I got to take that. Oh, I got to take it. I could literally
Now you're adding to your list.
Yeah. It's like the list keeps growing every conversation I have. Because great stories and great logic and I'm somebody who kind of knows about this stuff, so it's not like
Sure.
I'm walking in ignorant. I mean, I was taking vitamins when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So this is like an interesting thing. So now, what do you take? I mean, so I walk in.
I'm pragmatic about it.
Okay, so what do you
Very.
take?
And it really started with the life extension book that I read and the use of some megadoses of some vitamins. My favorite go-to, and is this camera rolling?
Yeah, it's rolling.
One of my favorite go-tos, and as a supplement manufacturer and marketer, it's kind of interesting because this is very, very inexpensive, is I will take enough high-quality buffered vitamin C that I don't have any digestive discomfort. And I've done that for years. So for me, that's about 6 grams, 6,000 milligrams of vitamin C. For other people, they might take a higher dose.
Right.
So that's as a foundational thing for me is I will take high-dose vitamin C. And I've done that as a way to, I was in the military before I got into technology. I've ridden myself hard and hung myself up wet too many times to count when I was younger. And I felt like I needed to do something to counterbalance that. And it's interesting, I've done things such as had an EBT heart scan, if you're familiar with that, and checked my calcium score, which is zero. Which is impossible given my previous lifestyle. Just doesn't make any sense. What
do you attribute that to?
I can attribute that possibly to this protocol. So vitamin C, foundationally, a high-quality multivitamin, multimineral, certainly. I take a therapeutic dose of omega-3, total omega-3s, EPA, and DHA. So for our product, we recommend at least 2 to 3 grams of total omega-3s per day, so 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams. And I do take vitamin D. I think people do need to have enough vitamin D just to kind of keep their immune system boosted. And I do check my vitamin D levels. So I take 2,000 to 4,000 IUs of a D3 a day. I would say that's my core.
Those are your staples.
Those are my staples. I mean, you can do other things to take cognitive, but if you take that foundationally, I found that serves me very well.
So, Buck, I really appreciate you, sharing your story, not only your story, but your expertise and sort of some of the personal sides of what you're doing personally in this realm.
Thank you, Patrick. It's always fun to share that.
Yeah. It is. It's really great conversation, and it's just it's interesting just to look at this whole world and this sphere, and people have this quest to want to live healthier and be better, and trying to sort this stuff out is not necessarily easy. So I appreciate you helping us help them.
Well, thank you for letting me share this story, and even if it has a minor impact on the people watching this, and helping them take. I hate to use the trite phrase, take control of your health.
Yeah.
But I think I've felt like I've taken control of my health. I'm 54, but I really feel better now than I did maybe when I was 30.
Yeah.
And I want the same for everyone else.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are bombarded all the time with information and marketing, and we need to know how to sort that out. That's why we had our interview with Buck. Really glad you tuned in to experience it. Congratulations, you've made it past the halfway point here in Supplements Revealed. This is an action-packed, content-rich series, and our whole aim here is to enrich your life and enrich the life of the people that you care about with this knowledge, with this wisdom, with this expertise. I want to encourage you again, own Supplements Revealed, support our mission, enrich your life, help other people. This is something that we feel very excited about, and during the free viewing period, which we're still in right now, you can get it at a very, very steep discount. So thanks for being here. Looking forward to being with you in the next episode.
Hydrogen gas can have a therapeutic effect in essentially every organ of the human body. There's been over 170 different human and animal disease models that have been used to study the effects of hydrogen. They compared head-to-head with an approved medical drug, and they found that hydrogen gas inhalation was actually more effective than the approved medical drug.
I think that naturopaths and holistic medicine and integrative MDs are really starting to embrace what they weren't embracing in the 80s, which is, okay, how do we fuel the body, feed the body these 2 or 3 dozen macronutrients, and then kind of sit back and let the body do its thing from there.
Regulation, by definition, is looking through the rearview mirror and fixing problems from the past. So what's happening now is that there is this growing distance and separation between current policy and actual practice in the real world. If we're going to propose or deal with the regulation of these products, what are they?